This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. I'm Molly.
Hi, I'm Pam.
And if you haven't already, we would love it if you would please like and subscribe. Just hit that button and also let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a suggestion about a case. Today, we're talking about Rob Reiner and Jubilant Sykes. These are two iconic men who were allegedly murdered by their adult sons. In fact, that's what we're titling this episode because these two murder cases, y'all, happened within a week of each other. And I know so many of us are familiar, of course, with movie director Rob Reiner. He's behind some of the biggest films, certainly of my generation, The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, you name it. And he just, I was telling Pam that whenever I would see a movie and I didn't even know necessarily right off the bat that Rob Reiner had directed it, there would be some moment, something that really touched me about relationships and communication between people, and I would realize it was a Rob Reiner film. And I just love him so much, and that was such a tragedy, him being allegedly murdered by his own son along with his wife, Michele. But he wasn't the only one. So, of course, with his fame and notoriety, people are talking about this horrible case, as they should be. We certainly are as well. But as Pam is going to talk to us a little bit in detail more, this other fella, Jubilant Sykes, he died just 6 days, also allegedly murdered by his adult son, just 6 days before what happened to Rob and Michele Reiner. So that one, of course, made headlines. Jubilant Sykes, a renowned singer, professional in the gospel world, as well as classical music, including opera, well-known, talented, by all accounts, very well loved in his profession, just like Rob Reiner was loved and adored by many in his profession. But we didn't get the headlines about it as we did, but it's the same issue. It's drugs and mental illness with these young men, and they somehow take it out on their parents, according to police.
Well, the person that did the most for them and loves them the most, and Jubilant, he was a famous person too, so both of these things have happened within the last 2 weeks, and here we are at Christmas time.
Yes.
And I know what that feels like.
Yes, I know.
It's giving me anxiety thinking about all this, but I certainly can empathize with the family, or which way are you feeling, what's going on, because it's just so bizarre. We're all walking around with a big old WTF bubble over our head going, and why? And there'll never be a good enough reason why. Trying to chase that why is what exactly sent me for residential inpatient treatment for 90 days for grief, trauma, and loss, which is what these folks are going through.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to process it, and then everybody in the world's trying to process it too, because this ain't right.
No, and certainly, parents are expecting to be buried by their children, but not literally buried by their children because they caused their death. And that's what's just so heartbreaking. I think you're right. So many people are like, of all people for this to happen to, this is just so shocking. And I am looking forward to hearing more about Jubilant. Of course, as soon as I saw the headlines about both men, I thought of you and what Sharon had gone through. And if you're not familiar, Pam's sister Sharon Adelot was a popular teacher, middle school teacher here in the Pensacola area. She lived in a community that's a bedroom community in Pensacola called Gulf Breeze, and she taught just down the highway at Navarre. And she was murdered. Initially, it was a murder charge against her own son, who was 17 at the time, Brandon Adelot, who attacked her viciously in the doorway of her home on Christmas Eve of 2013, literally left her unrecognizable in a puddle of her own blood. He came over with a knife, hidden up his sleeve. He went at her throat, he told us, immediately when she let him in the door. He then went and got a baseball bat that she bought for him because he was actually such a good baseball player. He was being pursued for a possible scholarship when he graduated from high school, but he went and got that bat. And according to the autopsy, Sharon was still quote unquote upright when he took that bat to her face, knocked pieces of her teeth and her jaw around the room. It was found on a credenza across the room. Blood splatter everywhere, including on the 10 Commandments, framed 10 Commandments that was right there by the door. And then he buried a knife in her eye. He buried another one in her skull. He broke off knives. He had to go and get more. And of course, he pled not guilty by reason of insanity and was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And the devastation of these headline-making cases is horrific in and of itself. But when it actually happens to you, and it happens on the holiday of the year that's about peace and love, and for Rob Reiner, that would have also been Hanukkah, the celebration of lights. And so it's just heartbreaking that these crimes happen at all, but then to happen around the holidays and then to lose some loved ones so violently in such an excruciating way. My heart does go out to the family of both Mr. Sykes and Rob Reiner's family, because much like yourself, now they're going to have to pick up the pieces and wake up every day and be like, I'm living in a nightmare. And how do I get through this? And it'll be interesting to see for me if these young men plead not guilty, just like Brandon Adelot did. And by the way, if you want to catch up on those episodes, you can find it on our playlist on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Gulf Coast Confidential. There's an entire playlist called Mommy Killer, Brandon Adelot. You can also just search our videos for the name Brandon Adelot. It's a very complex and convoluted case. We've been working on this for a long time. And when I say convoluted, I don't mean confusing. We know exactly what happened. I just mean it's very layered, and drugs were also involved. Brandon was involved in drugs. He had been taken to rehab. His mother had to work, beg, borrow, plead to get cooperation from her ex-husband, Brandon's dad, to help get him into rehab because he was acting so bizarrely, so strange. He was also threatening Sharon. He was also threatening other people. He was punching another kid. She saw that there was something wrong. She knew, and as we've since dug into this case, we realized that it was far more worse than she even knew, that he was sending nonsensical texts to a girl that he was dating, the daughter of another teacher, who appalls me that this teacher didn't let Sharon know that this was happening. So at any rate, obviously we know a lot about this case. This is something you've lived. I've lived it with you for the past 10 years. But we want to talk about this because it is so important on so many levels. And it really talks about mental health. It talks about drug addiction. It talks about family relationships and just the frustration that parents, at least Rob and Michele, were on the same page. And I don't know what Jubilant saw. I don't know if he ever saw it coming or if he was also fearful. But let's go ahead and start with the Rob Reiner case and talk about what we know there. So we know that this happened on December 14th, that his son Nick is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And the LA prosecutor's office says right now they're not taking the possibility of the death penalty off the table. So it's possible he could get the death penalty, even though California hasn't executed anyone in a very long time.
Well, the DA, the same one that's pushing back on the Menendez brothers, I call them the Menendi.
Yes.
Both of them.
I love it.
Pushing back on that, he's like, the maximum sentence is life in prison without possibility of parole and or the death penalty, and they have not taken that off the table. I think a lot of times they talk real hard and big like that in the beginning because it's not acceptable. Like when you were telling me all that stuff, and I know all that stuff about Sharon. I'm sitting here, I'm holding my breath.
I know.
Yeah, the same thing, I'll hold my breath for these folks here, but being a family member of someone that's murdered is a club you never want to be in. Being a family member of a murderer is the club you never want to be in. Being a family member of both of those is just past comprehension because you have so many feelings. A lot of times if it's not those two things within your family, you can say, I'm mad at that person right there or that person or what have you, but it gets so much in there. And the biggest mistake I made with all this with Sharon and her murder and stuff, and I don't mean any other way other than telling people about it, because that's why we do this podcast. I didn't know where to go, so I contacted you, is I kept those details. I didn't even know some of them at first. I kept those details so quiet because I have been brought up to be a polite Southern lady, and you don't talk about these things. But we do every week now, and sometimes twice a week, because I'm telling you, I don't know that I would still be here if it wasn't for you.
Oh, wow.
And my church and my friends, because a lot of people say and do some mean stuff to you when you're grieving because they are either A, clumsy, or they just cannot empathize. They haven't had it happen, praise God, or they just don't have the emotional bandwidth to do anything else about it. So you're by yourself a lot. And that is why we do this program, because we speak for victims and we have to tell some of this stuff that's not fun or polite or even what decent folks talk about.
Horrific.
Right.
Gruesome.
But we're going to learn some things here about Rob Reiner and them too, but also this not guilty by reason of insanity. I do not like that, because we were told that Brandon would never get out of the mental institution.
Right, because for those folks who aren't familiar, he was also diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Like these
just like
folks.
Nick and just like Mr. Singer Sykes' son.
Right, exactly. And you're told all kind of things because you don't live in the judicial system. You don't go to work there every day. You bank on what they tell you. If you tell me something and you are the state attorney for my state, I believe you.
Right. And even if he thought Brandon was never going to get out, you don't make that promise when there are literally loopholes within the system that it is not geared to keep him in Florida State Hospital, which is where they send the criminally insane in the city of Chattahoochee, Florida. It's in the Panhandle. So, yeah, Brandon was sent there. He's now been recommended for release. He's now been released into a group home where he's continued to violate the rules. He's been caught smoking weed. He's been caught with a box cutter at one point. I think that was still when he was at Florida State Hospital. At any rate, he's not a rule follower, big or small. I think that's indicative of a person who's not taking responsibility and doesn't need to be out in the public. But you didn't know at the time when the then state attorney, Bill Eden, said he will never get out, that his case was going to be reviewed every 6 months to see if his mental condition was still the same, that, whatever the case may be, you really felt like, oh, okay, you're exactly right. This is what my sister would have wanted. She would have wanted him not to be in prison. She would have wanted him to get the help that he needs. And instead, is it really help when they just make sure that you're taking your Benadryl and your antipsychotic meds? I mean, we haven't gotten into a lot of it, but Pam is the reason he even got well enough, if you will, worked directly with Florida State Hospital, because he put her on there as his advocate, his representative. He didn't even want his own dad. But it was a couple of years before he was found sane enough, if you will, to stand trial. And you were a big reason for that. So then he gets, on the stand, or he doesn't get on then he gets tried for this crime. Initially it was murder. And then he's found not guilty by reason of insanity. But Sharon was still killed violently. He still was taking drugs right up until he did that. And I know people will say, well, people with mental illness, that's common. They self-medicate. But is it the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Because there comes a point, Nick Reiner, by his own admission, was in and out of rehab 18 times. You want to talk about money? You know that. You've been through rehab. You know what it costs. Y'all, we're talking close to $60,000 every time, a pop, if you will. So his family had the resources to spend that on him. Sharon was going an uphill battle with her ex-husband, Brandon's dad, who didn't want to see that there was anything going on with him or deliberately chose the other way.
Right.
So he ended up, in my opinion, from what I've seen in these reports, pitting his son against her and siding with him when he would complain that she was concerned about him or that she wanted him to get drug tested or that she wanted him to go to rehab, because they thought it was drugs. They knew he was taking drugs. They didn't realize that there was the mental illness component. Yeah, the schizophrenia. But either way, she had an uphill battle because the ex-husband, Randy, ate a lot, who had lost his job a couple of years earlier for sexting a teenager in his class, a 14-year-old girl. So at any rate, Sharon had her hands full. I know the Reiners had their hands full, but it doesn't matter how much resources you have or whether you have the support of your spouse or not. These people sometimes will do exactly what they want to do regardless.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're listening literally to the voices in their head.
Right, exactly. And we are going to see this. These folks are strapped in for just like what we've been going through for 12 years. And I know me, if they would have told me that he's going to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, I would have raised all kind of hell, because I know me. But what they just kept calling it, or what Edens kept calling it, was the insanity defense, the insanity defense. When you sit up there and tell us how you killed your mother and that you did kill your mother and father or your father, you are guilty by insanity. Our state, Florida, does not have that. And that is one of the things that I keep studying up on, and I'm going push till we get it, because that is so insulting. You said you did it. You told us how you did it. You smiled and snickered and smirked and still doing it.
Told the police he thought he did the right thing.
Yeah, and still smoking dope in the rehab, in the halfway house and stuff. So the first thing folks do, and this is what the Reiners dealt with, 18 times in and out of rehab, even if it was for the proverbial 28 days, that's a month. So basically he spent 2 solid years in rehab to nothing happening. That young man, Nick's very best thinking got him in these places. Now, Rob and his wife, Michele, they were kind of gullible. Somewhere along the way, and I'm not saying that in a bad way.
I know you're not, yeah.
Because they wanted to believe, well, maybe all these people with all these PhDs and psych degrees and MDs and stuff, maybe we should listen to Nick. Mm-hmm. Well, his very best thinking got him a seat in rehab almost 2 years solid in a row, and no change behavior, because what they do teach you with drug addiction and alcoholism or any kind of thing that we're abusing or misusing, if you don't change, there's only 3 courses of action for you: jails, institutions, or death.
Yes.
So we got all 3 of these in both of these stories and in my family's story.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, I tell you, what not surprised me, aside from the fact that this horrific crime happened at all, but that, I think it sparks a conversation with so many families who are also dealing with drug addiction with their own children. And how do you draw that line? We can look at Sharon's story and we see how that ended. She did try to do right by, and I feel like this is what happened with the Reiners. They argued, we can talk about those last hours, if you will, those last days leading up to their death, but things had gotten to a head. He was continuing to decompensate, if you will, mentally. He was circling the drain, going downhill, getting more and more violent, getting more and more aggressive. Apparently, just over the years, he had torn up their house. He had torn up the pool house. They had tried everything from letting him feel the consequences of his behavior when he wanted to stay on drugs and didn't want to go to rehab. He became homeless. They tried letting him experience that. They tried bringing him in close, but they were arguing a lot by all accounts. They had gone to the Reiners had been invited to Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. They, from what I read, asked if they could bring Nick because they were concerned about him. They felt like, they wanted to keep him close. But like you and I were talking, he behaved strangely at the party by all accounts. He upset and offended a number of famous people that were there by his bizarre and insulting remarks. And apparently Rob Reiner even told one of the guests that he was becoming afraid of Nick, that he was concerned about his own safety. We know that that's accurate. Sharon lived that. He was shoving her into the refrigerator when she was bent over to try to even just get him the ingredients to make him a sandwich. And he was just feeling his oats and that those dead eyes, if you will, and just at any rate, she also was concerned for her safety, just like the Reiners were. And so I think what parents must be going through who are looking at the same situation, looking at the unpredictability of their own children. You love somebody with all your heart and you can't make them want to do what's right for themselves. And that's got to be so difficult. But I think if there's any takeaway for me in this is that at some point, if you are wondering, am I safe with my own child, my own adult child, then maybe it's time to go ahead and take some steps to have solid boundaries and protect yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. It seems counterintuitive to a parent. I'm not a parent, but even to like an aunt or what have you, that you would have to do that, because I've thought about it many times, and I thought about it with Jubilant Sykes, and I've thought about it with the Reiners, and I've thought about it with Sharon so many times I can't tell. How must it feel to be fighting off your own child, and they've got a knife, Brandon's case has several of them, and a bat, and this, that, and the other. You're looking at them, and you've done everything. You've got yourself in debt trying to help them. You've forgiven them for time after time after time, but you're literally having to fight them. And they are slitting your throat. All three of these cases are this. They are stabbing you in the face, stabbing you in the stomach. Brandon told us what all he did to Sharon. He even told us her last words were help. You know, so all that's going on. But there you're looking at your baby, your child, you know, and I think about that. And then in my mind, I even go more deep. I'm just like, I know she was crying out for my mom and dad, her mom and dad, and maybe us. I'm sure these people, the Reiners, were going, they're right there together. He's killing her and the daddy.
I know. And I feel like we don't have the full story yet as to whether or not they were killed in their sleep or were they awake. But, you know, let's just assume that he did attack them while they were sleeping. Maybe he got in. He killed one of them first, and then the other one's bound to have woken up. At any rate, that's all speculation.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
To learn about that.
We don't know.
But, you know, here we go. We start out with this Michael Stivic guy, you know, all in the family. You know, all in the family, I got to thinking about, it was familiar to me. And I was like, well, how old was I when this was happening? So about 12 to 18. You know,
those are impressionable years.
Yeah, and we would watch that, and you would look at Meathead as Archie Bunker called him, and you were just like, I like that guy. Yeah, he's a little bit goofy sometimes, but I like him, and you know, you're always rooting for him. So he always was likable, and I think that's what you said earlier about his pictures. You could touch the humanity or the connection or the vulnerability. And you still can look at Rob Reiner now, at the pictures, even up to a week ago. He's smiling, he's happy, he's got his chest out. You know, he ain't trying to be leading man or anything. He's like, look at me, I'm 71 years old, I'm 78 years old, and I finally can take a breath. Because he's got a younger daughter, Romy, and he's got an older son, Jake, and then there's Nick in the middle. Then he also has a daughter when he was married to Penny Marshall.
They adopted her,
right.
Yes.
Laverne DeFazio of Laverne and Shirley.
I love Penny Marshall,
I like that, too. So there's 4 kids there.
Tracy was the adopted daughter, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So on the day that this happened, on December 14th, it's just a normal day. It's the day after the fracas at the place over there at Billy, was it at, whose house? Conan's house.
Conan O'Brien's house, yeah.
And they said some people were getting upset with the way Nick was acting, and they had wanted to call 911. And he didn't want anyone to call 911. He's like, my party, my house. You're not trying to be ugly.
But he did ask them to have him leave.
Yeah, right, yes. Exactly. So, but see, here is Michele and Rob Reiner taking this grown man with them everywhere they go as their plus one. Okay, because they can't let him out of their sight. He's living in the guest house. Now, here's what I think about. If you've been on drugs and you've done this, that, and the other, you've been in rehab 18 times, which, you know, some people have been 10 and 12 times. I mean, you have to work a program when you go there. Nobody else can want it for you more than you do. So you've got all that going on. Then he's experienced homelessness, but yet you're in the guest house behind the $13 million mansion.
Good
and he's
gracious.
still not happy.
No, he's still not happy. Well, let's take a quick break because I do want to talk a little bit more about those last hours leading up to this. But first, we do want to thank our advertiser, Joe Zarzar with Zarzar Law. He's a personal injury attorney here in the Pensacola area, but he handles cases throughout Alabama as well. And, you know, on this show, as Pam mentioned, we like to be a voice for the voiceless. We take things from a victim's point of view. That doesn't mean we're going to automatically believe them or advocate for them if we don't think that what they have to say is true. But so many times you do feel like you're helpless. You don't have the answers. You don't know where to turn. You feel like the system or the institution that you're up against is bigger than you. It's going to swallow you whole, whether it's an insurance company due to a car accident or maybe it's a medical malpractice case. Joe represents victims in that way. He gives them a voice. He does the fighting for you. So oftentimes if you have been hurt through no fault of your own, maybe it's a car accident, maybe it's a slip and fall, maybe it's a medical malpractice situation, whatever the case may be, you need somebody who's going to fight to get those answers for you and give you good advice on next steps and how you can protect yourself, because sometimes the consequences of those injuries are long lasting. You can't work. You don't have the same relationships with your family members because it could potentially cause some disabilities and other issues. So we would suggest, of course, that you give Joe Zarzar a call and they can evaluate your case and let you know what those next steps are. So again, we appreciate Zarzar Law's support of Gulf Coast Confidential. But turning now back to the Rob Reiner story and talking about Nick Reiner. So this party was just a couple of days, not long before that this terrible crime happened. And then let's, I guess, fast forward to the actual when their bodies were found.
Okay. All right. Well, that was Romy a massage therapist was scheduled to come at 2:00 to give Rob a massage, and he couldn't get in, so somehow Romy got the message, and she went over there to go see what's going on. Dad's got a massage appointment, and so she goes in there, and at first she sees her dad dead.
In the master bedroom, I
right.
understand.
Yeah, they were both in the master bedroom. And so she flees the house. Can you imagine, like, the trauma and the shock and everything about it?
Bless her heart.
Yeah. And so she left so quickly, she didn't notice that her mom was dead also. And when she came out of the house, she asked a friend to call 911. So that was her friend that did that, and that was between 2 and 3. And so the LA Fire Department got there first, and they get there and go, oh my gosh, we need the police department too. But a paramedic lets Romy know, your mom too, And so this is incomprehensible to her, inconsolable. So there's all that going on. And then between then and about 9:15 at night they pick up Nick. He was at a hotel, but he was at a park, that Exposition Park, I think, that wasn't too far away from where he killed them.
I've seen some of the video that they've taken from different cameras around the area that showed him walking, buying a soda not long before he got arrested, all of that, just living his life, just acting like nothing ever happened.
No, smoking and, just walking around. And so there are a lot of questions about this. How did it was a boutique hotel, motel. And how did he check in after he killed him? Did he check in before? Because he had blood all over him, from killing 2 people, his parents. And so there's a lot more questions. That's why I say we can't push this down or lock this down right now, but we're going by the timelines of the things that we have been told. And, also,
maybe he cleaned up before he went.
That's what they're saying. Or maybe he went and checked into the room before he killed them and got all that taken care of and had the key in his pocket. So there's a lot of maybes, but I think one of the maids had come in there and she had reported that she had seen blood on the sheets and that some of the sheets were over the windows.
And this is at the hotel where he was staying.
So that's where the police...
Interesting.
The police picked him up at Exposition Park, not at that hotel.
Interesting. So Nick had his first court appearance recently, and he was in the turtle suit. That's why Pam brought the Beanie Baby turtle.
Right.
But it's basically a suicide prevention suit. And so he is going to be represented by Alan Jackson, no, not the country singer, but this is an attorney that is representing him. And I did read a couple of quotes from him basically saying, this is sad all the way around, please be patient. We're trying to get to the bottom of all this. And my personal thought is, why keep him from killing himself? I mean, that's just maybe a little bit harsh, but I'm kind of, I'm like, what you did was so horrible and cruel. And I get it. I get that there's mental illness involved and that influenced his decision, but he also made a decision to, continue doing drugs. He made that decision, whether it was influenced under mental illness or not. That was his choice to do what he did. And pardon me if I really don't care what he does to himself.
Well, see, and that's where some of these things come out. There have been so many cases of like a murder-suicide and stuff. And you're just like, if you're that unhappy, then, do your thing, I guess, and don't kill
take
other
anybody
people.
else out.
Because Rob and his wife, Michele, aren't the currency for what's going on with him, because there's always somebody that pays for it, and it's not necessarily the person doing all this. But so here he is in his pickle suit, and he's behind a glass, much like the glass you're behind, like at a hockey game, and he's back there, and they didn't have photographers, so they had a sketch in there, and he does look, rounded shoulders, and with that smock, there's not underwear, there's not shirt, there's not anything you can hurt yourself with. That's why they have that. for them to wear. But also, Alan Jackson was Karen Reed's attorney of all that stuff that went on for years up in Massachusetts. Yeah, and she was acquitted of her charges there. So, I mean, he's a big time when he represented Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, and some other folks that are Phil Spector.
Pariahs might be another word. So he doesn't shy away from the controversial quote unquote bad guys, if you will, in headlines.
Right. And he has big bucks. I mean, this isn't a little $1,000 an hour attorney.
That's what gets me too. Here it is. He's paying for that with his parents' money. They are funding a defense for the person that took them out. And I can't help but understand and believe that the Reiners, with all their heart, loved their son and even now want good things to come of all this. I mean, no parent wants to die, I can't imagine. But they do love their children. I know Sharon had to be excruciating. Not only are you literally being physically killed, but emotionally, like you said, that's your baby that's taking you out. So, but just from somebody from the outside looking in who just appreciates the fact that we all have a right to live and we all have a right to enjoy our lives, he just stole that from them, and then he's using everything they built to defend himself against it.
Right. And the system. See, this is where we are, and this is what comes up in me every time something like this happens. I honestly am gobsmacked that we had 2 men killed by their own adult sons and a mama killed by the adult son.
Almost an adult son.
Right.
Oh, the mom. Yeah, Michelle. Yeah, I was thinking of Sharon, but yeah.
Yeah. So, well, and then like Sharon, I
he was 17, almost 18, just 2 months from turning 18.
Right. So all that stuff, I get to looking at all this stuff and I'm like, who could really put their head around it? When you're in it, you have to. I mean, I've been called weird so many more times in these last 12 years than I have the whole 50-something before. So, because grief is so hard. It's so bizarre, even when it's predictable, like grandparents. Like my grandparents both lived, my mom's parents lived into their mid-80s. So, I mean, that's a normal, natural life. But when it's a 48-year-old woman killed by their own son, or a 79 or 78-year-old man and a 68-year-old woman, and then a 71 with Jubilant, you can't make sense of it. But yet here we are in the system, a system that the safest place in America, if you are a offender, is in that courtroom. The worst place, if you are a victim, is in same said courtroom, because we're having to all scrape and bow and worry about his rights when he stole the rights of living, breathing people and our rights too. But praise God, our state, Florida, has what's called Marsy's Law. And those are laws that are for the victims. You have to invoke some of them. And a lot of people don't know about it. But invoke it means I am asking for Marsy's Law. Like at one time they wanted to send us out of the courtroom. And I said, Marsy's Law says I can be in here. So they're, oh, yeah, it does, So it's something we're all learning about. But see, I looked at things and I'm like, who do I talk to? I don't know anybody, and thank God I don't. But by the same token, that's why you and I will go sit in court with folks sometimes, because we've been down this road.
Absolutely, many times. I do want to mention, if you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse, there is help available. There's a helpline. It's called SAMHSA, and it's 1-800-662-HELP, HELP. So I just want to throw that in there real quick. And I think you also have the suicide lifeline as well.
And this one is 988. It's real simple. That is a call and or a text. And the thing is that sometimes folks don't know how to come out of this tornado to get help. But if we keep talking about this and keep saying, there is help, there is help, there is help, there is help, even if you have to go to rehab 18 times, maybe it takes 19.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about Jubilant. Of course, we're going to continue to follow the Reiners case and see what happens with Nick and what he ends up pleading to. But in the meantime, let's talk about Mr. Sykes and what happened with that situation, because that was about a week before the Reiners were killed.
Right. Like Jubilant Sykes, he was always a singer. He loved being a singer when he was a little boy. And growing up prepubescent, he was a beautiful soprano. I mean, and he loved that he could hit those high notes. That was his thing. But then when his voice started changing, he was like, kind of got lost in the thing. He didn't really go to music that much until a certain teacher kind of said, hey, let's experiment with your new teenager voice. So he had become this beautiful, velvety baritone over time. And everybody that heard him could tell it, that he's going to be somebody. So we've got this man that's his tool, his voice. So Jubilant Sykes, he was 71 years old. His wife's name is Cecilia, or they call her CeCe.
And they also lived in the LA area.
Like Santa Monica. Yeah. So they had been married about 37 years. They had 3 boys, and Micah was the middle child there. And that they basically had him living close too. You know, there wasn't as much oversight as like the Reiners had with Nick. So Jubilant, you wonder about how to get his name. He said, my mama named me Jubilant. And they were like, why? He said, she wanted me to be jubilant,
wow.
You know. And so he said, and when I am singing or around music, I am jubilant.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So he really was living his gift.
Right. And he loved the Lord. He loved the Lord so much. He even kept going to his own little church near his home and would sing there. Now he's been in every fancy thing you can think of, the Met, Carnegie Hall, the Apollo, and then at some point, I think when he was 19, he majored in music as his major, music performance. And a benefactor or someone that came along, they offered to pay his way and support him through Austria and Paris.
Wow.
So he could study abroad.
Wow, that's incredible. And he built an amazing career. I had not heard of him before, but it sounds like he was certainly well known in his musical circles.
Oh, yeah.
and had done remarkably well.
Oh, yeah. I love this kind of voice and singing. You know, I love music and theater and dancing and all that stuff. Well, he had that deep, deep voice that one of his best songs, if you want to listen to him, listen to Jubilant Sykes. One of his things is Give Me Jesus. And then Sometimes I Feel Like the Motherless Child, all together. And he was in some movies and some musicals too. And then also he has a bunch of other songs that he was singing that were like the African-American spirituals. Because what he found out when he'd hear his grandmother sing them, that he didn't understand them, but they moved him. So that's what he said, music and singing is connecting and moving people.
That's fantastic. Well, so how long had his son been struggling with mental illness and drugs?
I don't think we know that just yet. A lot of this is evolving also. So this case happened like 6 days before the Reiners. And we heard some about it on the internet, especially if you like music and theater, stuff like that. So he basically was helping all of his children, but that middle one is the one that needed the most help. So I don't know exactly what happened there, because when he came over, Micah is his name, when Micah came over, he slit Jubilant's throat. And CeCe, his wife of 37 years, was there. And she's the one that called 911 in that case.
That's hard. So he did not attack her, it sounds like, thankfully. But what a horrific thing to witness.
I know. And both of these young men, they had daddies. These aren't hardtail daddies, I don't think. That's not reported here. They both seem to be those likable, affable people and that like loved and adored their children. And there's just something about when we're mad at somebody or hurting somebody, it seems like we hurt the person that loves us the most.
Because they're trying to do what's best for them, and it's not what they want to hear.
Right.
They just want to hear, yeah, you can live in the pool house and do drugs, Nick. Or, yeah, Micah, it's okay if you want to be angry and off your rocker and continue to do drugs. That's what they seem to want to hear. And instead, they're getting a normal reaction from a parent who loves them that's saying, no, that's not best for you. I've got to set these boundaries for your sake as well as my sake. And that is who they take him out on.
Right.
What we saw with Sharon and Brandon. She's like, you need help. You're not behaving right. And unfortunately, his dad was in his ear saying, it's not you, it's her. And then he took it out on her. So I can't help but think that somewhere in the minds of Micah and Nick, there was this resentment of you're standing in the way of the life I want to lead.
Right. Or you're so wonderful, I can never be that. Or I'm jealous or whatever.
Definitely.
Jealousy is such an ugly monster.
Amen.
And that is the way evil comes in. You know, that we got to do whatever we can when this evil starts to try to come in our minds and our homes and stuff, rebuke that in the name of Jesus and get it out of our house. Because there has to be something wrong with people that do this. My nephew and these two young men.
Without a doubt, for sure. Absolutely. Yes, they do have mental illness. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It explains it, but it doesn't excuse it. And that's my problem with the not guilty by reason of insanity.
And it doesn't mean let us throw you back out there and give you a second
you've
chance.
Been taking your Benadryl and your anti-Sykes, which is the first thing you don't want to take when you're out of supervision.
Right. I know as a pharmacist, even people that are well-maintained and stuff, the side effects of the antipsychotics are just
lethargy or lethargy, I should say.
Gaining weight and cotton mouth, cotton eyes, sexual libido goes down, especially for men, and they're just, washed out. So that's one of the first things that they do. I think that is what happened with Micah. I think that he was not taking his meds because he just didn't want to. There's something that comes up in them when we keep, and I'm not saying enabling type of thing, but we love them so much. It's like we just want to help you.
Yeah, and stay close. So maybe we can keep an eye on you and keep you from going off the cliff.
Right. And we can't want it more than they do. But if someone has something wrong with their brain or mind or whatever, you have to let other people do your thinking sometimes. And that may be too much for some people. But, I mean, seriously, if your mind is messed up and you're still trying to process normal things, it's not going to come out the same way.
No, you're exactly right. How did you deal with it in those first days after Sharon? We talk about rehab, and I think that's something that a lot of our audience responds to as well. I know I've heard it from folks in the community. It's important to, I think, be authentic and real and share our own experiences. And I think that's one of the ways that you've experienced this. It's horrific enough to lose Sharon in the way that you did. You'd already struggled with addiction issues in the past, and it was something that sort of pushed you over the edge a little bit, but not in obviously you came back from it. But let's talk a little bit about that, just the impact that grief has, because that's what the families of Mr. Sykes, that's what the families of the Reiners, they're all going to be dealing with this too. And, God forbid that they have any addiction issues as well that this could trigger. But whether it's that, people do find that they start doing things they might not normally have done when they're grieving.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your experience and what that was like after Sharon's death.
Well, first of all, that night, still incredulous to me. And right now, this time of year, I am very emotional and peppered, and I have to self-soothe myself if something gets too much. Like right now, I stay home a lot, and I'm a get out in the world person. But right now, and then I spend a lot of time in prayer. But I do remember falling to my knees that night. Never had seen that many blue and red lights and Christmas lights all mixed together, and my mom and dad and everybody like that. You're like, is this real? I remember falling to my knees in a prayer like this and looking up at heaven going, God, what in your name good is going to come from this? And I don't even know if that's a logical thought or whatever, but that is how we had been trained, that God loves us and stuff. And what I had to learn after that, Tricia and I stood there until they brought Sharon's body out in the black
Tricia
bag.
is Pam's older sister. Younger sister. Pam's younger sister.
I got two baby sisters.
Trisha's going to jump me for saying that now, but
She'll probably say, I'm more mature. I can see how you made that mistake.
Right. Well, for those who didn't know the story, but Trisha's your sister.
So we were standing there just holding hands. It was so cold. But we saw them just like kind of throw her in a cargo van and off they go. And we remember thinking, because we talked about that, indignant. But that time, Biz, Sharon's baby girl, I didn't know whose house she was at because Randy had taken her somewhere to somebody's house after they walked up to the door.
Right. For those who aren't familiar, Randy Adelot's the ex-husband, and he and Sharon had two children together, Brandon, who we've been talking about, and Elizabeth Adelot, also known as Biz. And he had returned Biz to Sharon that night. She was actually expecting both of them. That's why she opened the door for Brandon, even though he wasn't living with her at the time. He was living with his dad, but Sharon had taken Elizabeth Biz over to his apartment to go do some last minute Christmas shopping, stocking stuffer type things. And so she was expecting Randy to bring Elizabeth. He called to say that they were late because he decided to take Elizabeth shopping for a last minute Christmas gift. So they arrived just within minutes after Brandon had left Sharon in an unrecognizable pool of her own blood. And the door was still cracked. And so Elizabeth did see a little bit, we understand because she called you and then the phone went dead and assuming that Randy hung up the phone, but then he took her to a neighbor's house. So just such an uncomfortable, strange situation all the way around. And he called 911 and he even said, we've played this clip before on these other episodes, but basically he says in the 911 call, she's dead. He stabbed her in the head. And then he was saying somebody's dead. Like she's a stranger. Like he just happened to come across the body of somebody he didn't know, not the mother of his children, not his ex-wife. To me, it was just such a telling statement.
Oh, yeah. And he said, my son. He even told the 911 on there. And, like I said, I'm sitting here and like these folks right here, and this was Sharon, and there's other folks too of cases that keep coming up. And I'm like, the only way that I can sit here today is because of counseling, and I have had EMDR, the basic kind of treatment that helps you to work through some of the most savage things in your brain. Because before that, I could never hardly even open my own door to my house without having that, this is what happened to Sharon. Or like if I cut myself with a knife or try to cut a watermelon or something.
Or just use a knife.
Right.
Yeah.
I cannot do it, but I'm better than I was. But what happened that night too is so cold. Well, Sharon's gone. Tricia and I just stand there looking at each other, and there's a few police there. I kept trying to run to the door to go into the house because I was like, she's my baby sister. I want to hold her, and she's laying in the floor by herself right at their door. And they would not let me, and I'm glad they did not. And so Tricia and I stand there, and so Randy's sister had said, Pam, they were somewhere else down the neighborhood, why don't you take Biz and Randy to your house, which is okay. I mean, I wanted Biz to be there. And so they stayed at my house for a couple of weeks. But that night was Christmas Eve. The next morning is Christmas morning. Biz slept in my bed with me. I held her all night long because she would wake up. She would wake up and look around. She's just a little girl. She's 10. And I would just hold her. So that morning she woke up and she said, Pi, that's my nickname. Pi, is this bad? Did Santa Claus forget me? And I said, no, Santa Claus did not forget you. Because my sister Patricia had gone over to get some of the gifts over at Sharon's house that had Sharon's blood on them. And she unboxed them and wrapped them for some that, because we still had to go on for Elizabeth and for our family, for our mother and daddy and ourselves. So she asked me that. Then she wanted me to hold her, went sat up in a chair in my room, and she said, Pi, is my mommy dead? And I said, what do you think, Busy Bee? And she said, I think yes, like that. And then she said, who killed my mommy? Like that. And I said, who do you think, Busy? And she said, Papa? Like that. And she said, I wish him to, pointing to hell. And I just remember just after that going, I cannot be anything but strong for her.
And then that's almost a burden that you place on yourself. And then it cracked.
It did. Yeah. I didn't care. I didn't care if I got up and went to work. I didn't care. Well, see, Randy had for a few weeks, I did okay. Randy took Elizabeth away from us, our whole family. We haven't seen her in years and years and years. And just like he programmed Brandon in a couple of months, he's had 10, 11, 12 years now to program Biz to where she doesn't have anything to do with anybody on our side of the family. And we had always been there for her. Right. So I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawyers and doing this and sending letters and all my time and everything, asking just to get to see our niece. And then that's when Randy put a restraining order on us or saying we're stalking or whatever. So this is not going to be an easy road for any of these folks because everybody's going to have their own feelings. This was their parents and dad, and then there's their sibling beside them. So it's just something else. But after that, there was one when I was taking, the doctor had given me some lorazepam for my nerves. Well, that morning, I think I'd taken 2 of those, and I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to do anything. I had gone in my bathroom so I thought, I'll get up, I'll go. It's just everything that I had to go. I went in there, and I was barely dressed, and I was putting on my makeup, and then I just decided I cannot even stand up. So I was in the floor, no clothes hardly on, with M&Ms all around me. I don't even like M&Ms. So, I mean, it just, and that is when I went away basically for 90 days. And I say it like that. It's not like went away like a bad thing, but got out of everything. When you're at a place where they can help take care of you and put you in a recovery program, because it wasn't necessarily for addiction or substance abuse. Mine was grief, trauma, and loss can do and give the same type of results that a pill or a drink or gambling or sex or power, whatever the addiction is, it was running and ruining my life. So that's about $90,000 for 3 months that you're there.
Good Lord,
and,
wow.
And I mean, but it's worth it.
Well, and that also goes to bigger points too. When people do, it is 100% worth it, but it's just not available for everyone. There's so many people that do need that kind of treatment,
Yep.
but it goes to show how valuable it is.
Oh,
really,
definitely.
How important it is.
And now since then, that was 2013. Now since then, a lot of insurances cover that.
Wonderful.
And a lot of states, I know Alabama does, will help you do anything almost to help get you into a rehab facility, because we can't just look at everybody and just go, well, you're a little druggy, you're a little alky, you're a little, overly emotional person or whatever.
Labeling doesn't address the issues.
No, or neither does judging. So we are who we are. So I have a tender heart for these people with schizophrenia, because it's usually not a primary diagnosis. It's usually a secondary or tertiary, meaning 2 or 3 things happening at one time, all at one time. So I don't know what the answer is, but it certainly isn't to let someone that before, these folks had charmed lives just like my nephew did. Can you imagine what kind of decisions they would make without their parents?
No, I cannot. And, we continue to follow Brandon's case because, again, the state has recommended him to a group home, and it's possible that he could be released from that at some point as well. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nick Reiner, what he ends up playing in this case, as well as Mr. Sykes' son, Micah. But our hearts and prayers go out to their families for their losses. And thank you so much for just sharing about your experiences too, Pam, because I think so many people, even if it isn't some horrible crime that's happened to them, we all experience loss and grief in smaller ways, whether it's, losing my parents or, the death of a relationship. I think so many people can relate to loss. And if you can overcome that, through Jesus' sweet tea and Zumba, as you like to say,
that's what I like to say.
Then people can, turn and use that as an example that they too can survive the horribleness that happens sometimes.
Anybody that tries to threaten or bully or whatever type of thing, because, folks are kind of ugly sometimes. They don't understand stuff. I'm think to myself, look, I survived my sister's murder by her own child. I don't know what you think you're going to do to me that's going to hurt me worse than that, but there's nothing that's going to hurt me worse than that.
Well, I think that wraps it up for us on this particular episode. We do want to mention real quick another case that we've been following. Danica Troy, 14 years old, murdered, police say, by 2 young men, a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, who basically lured her into the woods to kill her. And it's horrific. It's making national headlines now. But those 2 young men have been indicted on murder charges. So we did want to let you know that that's another case that we're continuing to follow. And again, we would love it if you would just please like and subscribe and leave us a comment, or if you have a question, or if there's a case that you want us to cover or an update. We're continuing to follow August Borden as well. I know a lot of folks are looking for an update on that case. He's the 15-year-old who appears to have been brutally assaulted at school, and the entire school district in this Alabama town is covering it up according to the family. So, and we certainly see evidence of that as well. It certainly seems to be the case because they're not finding any wrongdoing. So these are cases that we just are continuing to follow. Also, the Burklow, the family in Pace here, that's another big local story. They've continued to have court dates, so we're following that as well. There's not a whole lot that's happening, but they're basically accused of running a pill mill out of a pharmacy there and contributing to a lot of dealing drugs on the side on the black market, if you will. So we're going to continue to follow those cases as well. Anything else you'd like to mention, Pam?
Well, there's several other things that we're looking at too there. I wanted to tell you about this one. This lady, she's named Rizzy, and she's a TikToker, and she's cute as she could be. But basically, she was getting bullied by other TikTokers on something that they call drama talk, which is the dark side of TikTok. Well, anyway, they just kept on and on and on with her that she took her very own life live. Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes. And these are grown women doing this on that. So that was, she basically, they were doxing her and swatting her. I mean, these are grown women. She had a beautiful smile, and basically she belonged to a church without walls. And so she was helping people because just like me sitting here, losing my emotional whatever it is.
Cool.
Whatever. Yeah, cool. Losing that, But anyway, they would find like the places they could jab at her and stuff. She had an emotional support dog, and that was her hero. I mean, so she shared her journey just like we were sharing right here, but people just came for her.
Bless her heart. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and so that was bullying and encouragement. And then there's a guy named Zane Shamblin. I'm looking into this one right now. I haven't told you about this one yet. ChatGPT basically stayed on the phone with him for about 5 hours. He was in his car drinking like hard tea or hard lemonade or hard ciders or whatever, something with some and he had his gun and he had it to his head and he kept telling ChatGPT, she said, "Am I being a coward?" And they're like, and that ChatGPT can speak to you so colloquial or so like, "No, brah. Dude, what?"
You can set it up that way. You can have it set to like whatever tone you want it to have.
Right. So this was a friendly tone. And for 5 hours, ChatGPT came along with him until he did it. His parents didn't know he did that. I think he's 23. His parents didn't know he did that till they started reading these exchange back and forth. So now they are going to sue the ChatGPT parents, companies or whatever, because they say, and I don't think they're wrong on this, they say when that conversation gets back and forth like that, there should be a stopgap that has a human being, like with credentials that knows how to deal with that with someone, because a person like that is not thinking correctly right then. We know
They're
that.
vulnerable.
Right. And then the other is like a 13-year-old boy. He got on ChatGPT and he Googled how to kill my friend.
Oh, Lord.
So there are so many cases that we're doing. We had these lined up to already be done, but so much current stuff keeps happening. So these are things we'll do after the first of the year.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much, Pam. And we thank you so much for joining us as well. That is it for this episode. Rob Reiner and Jubilant Sykes, two iconic men allegedly murdered by their adult sons. If you'd like, you can listen to our other episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, man of many hats and talents, James Roy. And please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.